Welcome. Hello and welcome to the first of our deep dives really into The Empire Strikes Back, sort of a capstone series. And I've just chosen sort of slightly random things to talk about. So the first one actually was prompted by Xanthe and her Star Wars Music Minute as they've just finished the final episode on that film, which is brilliant, by the way. And one of the things that cropped up was, I think it was Connor Power who said something about bubbling. And I thought, oh, how much bubbling is there in The Empire Strikes Back? There's quite a bit in The Phantom Menace, which I can look at another time, but I thought I'd focus on Empire at least today. But of course, we can sort of try and find various Phantom Menace ones as well. But I thought I'd start with 1M2, 2M1 Luke's Escape. Bar 20 in the Force theme. So it's partly this, really. So all of this stuff. So it's when we hear the Force theme. I'll try and find the relevant bit on Sibelius. So I don't think actually a keyboard is going to help with this at the moment. So I'm not going to bother with that at the moment. But this is the bit in question. And then it all sort of all hell breaks loose at that point as well. So it's this sort of bubbling sort of texture that we get. That's sort of what I'm talking about. It's actually quite difficult to find in symphonic repertoire, oddly. There's very little in terms of that sort of type of playing. I mean, the only other thing really obviously we see it in sort of a little bit in Debussy, Image, for example, La Mer, very much so, with lots of tremolando, that sort of thing. But this type of stuff where you sort of get up and down scalic types is actually quite rare. Obviously, the most famous one is this bit. I'm just using Brad's bit of information here because I haven't done this one for Hedwig's theme. In terms of how it works with everything else going around it, and I think that's the important bit. So before we look at that here, I think in my analysis originally, I'd said, it's an 0134, but with a fifth note in it. So it should be a C sharp if it was octatonic. And a lot of the time, Williams loves to subvert these things. So it's already so ingrained in his work since the 1950s. I think I just made a point, actually, that, there's a very telling documentary when he's talking to Alex North about modality. Not talking to Alex North, talking about Alex North and his approach to modalities, and that his being not an European emigre, but he wanted to sort of mix the Russian tradition with jazz, essentially, as an American tradition, and then see what comes out. And I think John Williams was striving for the same thing way back in the 1950s, 60s. So all of this stuff is very much ingrained in his work. But he does like to subvert things slightly, so just putting an extra note in there actually makes sense. It's reasonably difficult, reasonably okay to play. First finger, second, third, fourth, probably in sort of half position, we call it, on the violin. But then we've got other things here, so that it's combined with, one of his favourite intervals is that diminished fifth or augmented fourth idea. So that's not octatonic at all. It's just another sort of device, this time with violas going 1, 2, 3, 4 with the fingers. And then eventually the cellos come in with octatonic T2. I think actually this is where it's helpful to have a keyboard. Like that. You can vaguely see it, I think. So we can see that sort of octatonic element coming into play as well. So it's, again, almost octatonic. This one is an octatonic 0134. By the way, when I say 0134, O means middle C, 1 is C sharp, 2, 3 is E flat, and 4 is E natural. But you can apply those numbers to anything in terms of relative pitch sets. So that's T1 transposed by 1 semitone, T2 would be transposed by 2 semitones. There we go. So he's combining lots of different ones of those. So T1, T2, and T0 as well, which is interesting. No, sorry, not T0. So it's just 2 octatonic transpositions. But it means that it sounds chromatic because, of course, 2 of those are going to cover all of the chromatic notes. But it's also interesting that, you know, a lot of his other bits that are going on are also tend to be octatonic as well, or something else. So here it's sort of Hungarian minor, and then he morphs from this sort of idea straight into an F-based minor. I say bass minor because it can be a mixture of harmonic, melodic, diatonic, Locrian, octatonic, bass on F, Hungarian minor, all of those things. And what it does is it combines this sort of almost mishmash of different types of scales. So if I put the pedal down, this was a technique that my old teacher Joe Horowitz used to say, is when you want to find out harmony, just put the pedal down and just play all the notes in something, and you'll find out what it is. So if we got, so that's the harmonic minor. So that's also with the Hungarian. So that's everything else. That's also melodic. That's also that as well, octatonic. So we've got all of those notes. Occasionally they miss out one note, maybe, from the 12-tone idea. But essentially that's what's going on. And we get this really weird bubbling effect, which is extremely effective. Doesn't sound quite atonal. It's almost there. It's not atonal because it's based on F now. And also, just in terms of the general direction, you know, basically it's sort of bubbling all in the same register. So that's just, you know, completely in between G and I think the highest note's C. Then it starts shifting up in pitch, which is because it's shifting up in tension. So we get this long sort of idea. Let me put that piano keyboard on again. So here, sorry, D, E, A flat. It goes up to there. I think eventually it just goes up to the highest note possible. Don't know why it always shifts those things. Really irritating. And then, so that's the sort of climactic bit of the phrase as well. So it's interesting how he sort of designs it. You know, there's always a purpose to what's going on. Yeah. So as soon as the fourth theme kicks in, then it starts being accompaniment material for it. So that's one thing. So I'm going to go back to Brad's idea in terms of, well, what notes are they? So, you know, we discussed that it was basically octatonic. So this one is basically E minor. So E melodic minor. So we've got this. And I'm just paraphrasing. I'm not trying to play every note. So here, he's just changing it to a little octatonic, but then going back to E minor, and he does that quite a lot of the time. As Brad has already said, you know, imagine having to learn and perform a unique but equally difficult violin line every time the theme comes, so it tends to stay the same. So he is aware of that. And then he goes back to E minor. But then he cancels out the F sharp as it goes. Which is really weird. You know, does it work without that? Sorry. So we're in E minor. But he's doing something very strange there. So he's actually going into a sort of A minor, but when it's still E there, almost anticipating that note. But then he goes back to E minor. But then he's using A again. So it's almost, he's sort of... almost doing that, which is a really weird way of harmonizing it. It's not the sort of thing that you would sort of expect, especially because it's a fourth, A and E at that point. And also, it's got an E minor outline, but that is more ambiguous. So here we do have the fourth here that we already had there. So it's a sort of weird anticipation effect. Yeah, so it's a sort of half dim type of idea, except that he has this sort of weird sort of, you know, chromatic, I suppose, change. You know, there's nothing to stop him putting the F sharp there, so why did he put the F natural? Simply because he wanted to. I suppose it's just a feeling. So we've then got sort of fourth melodic minor mode, I suppose. And I'm sure there's a name for that, and I just can't remember what it is. So you'll probably tell me in the comments, hopefully. And then it goes into an arpeggiation. And there's a real change at this point as well. And then that false relation. So it's really interesting, that sort of change here, where we have the false relation between F sharp and F natural. So for false relation to occur, we have the a enharmonically shifted same letter name note, but not in the same voice. So an ambiguous chord there because it's just a dyad with some filigree over the top. So that chord here is a major chord with a flat six. And it's a very, very common chord. In this way, it's disguised. And then back to E harmonic minor at that point. So he's combining little octatonic moments with E minor and then using mode 4, the melodic minor scale. Which is that Phrygian dominant? I can't remember. I'm going to have to now look it up. Because otherwise it's just going to annoy me. And you can tell I'm not a jazzer because I don't know it instantly. I have to actually have to look it up. Where are we? Mode 4, mode 4, mode 4, mode 4. Lydian dominant. There we go. Okay, the overtone scale. Fine. So that one. So it's basically mixolydian with sharp 4. So that's a good way of sort of trying to remember it. So it does follow a design. So enough of that for the time being, but let's have a look at another example. So I'm going to come out of that and then go into some other things. So I've got a few other bits and pieces lined up here. And sometimes they differ in the way that they use this sort of bubbling effect. So the next one is for M2. Whoops, I'm in the wrong thing there. So let's go back here. As you can see, I've got quite a few bits. So this is one of the first ones I did, actually. So the Rebels escape again. So more of this coming. So this one was bar 209. Where are we? Almost there. Yeah, so another one here. So this one is, again, used as an accompaniment figure. So generally speaking, they tend to accompany something going on. And it's this sort of scalic up and down idea. And as we can see, it just goes gradually up one note. And then to whatever the next sort of target note is. So in this case, it's Darth Vader's theme against this. There we go. So interesting that this one has a slightly different design, but it's a very clear design. It's a sequence going up by one note each time. So that is that particular example. And again, he's using the natural minor at that point, which he did with the Harry Potter. So is there something to be drawn from this? Let's see whether that pattern continues with various other ones. So the next one is 5M1, Crash Landing. This is taken from my patrons page, so they've got access to all of these. So this one, let me just have a quick look, is bar 42 and 47. There we go. I used to know sort of bar things, and I can't remember what they are now. Is it that one? No, that's just a bar number. I've forgotten my shortcuts. Anyway, never mind. 42, 47. Yes, so this is another sort of particular one. So this is more of a sort of falling down bubbling effect, where we have just strings and low wind as well. And this time they're sort of, you know, mixing octatonic scales with every other note. I'm sure he didn't do that. I'm sure he just went, you know, let's just do a pattern. So it's a sort of octatonic idea, and then eventually has a chromatic effect. And it's interesting how it's all spaced out. You know, here he tends to use that sort of idea of third inversion. Like that. And we get this sort of really weird effect when it's on the piano. But it's still a sort of bubbling effect. And this particular one is not accompanying material, it's just a falling down. And that also happens in the losing a hand, 11M2, 12M1. So let's just go straight to that one. And 11M2, 12M1, sorry. Let's go to that. So this one is bar filigree, sort of descending filigree, bar 40. I kind of know which one it is. And I suppose you could sort of say that, you know, that all sort of Mussorgsky, you know, all of that is a type of bubbling effect as well. So this is another effect as well. And that is a completely unaltered octatonic scale as well. So far we've seen harmonic minors and octatonic scales. That's a whole one. And then there's other ones as well. So let's go back now. So the Solo and the Princess, I think that's another Imperial March one. So I've already shown that. So let's try and do something else. 7M2 attack position. I think that's also another Imperial one, but let's have a quick look. So they're all sort of coming up here. Yeah, so another one here. It's just another little bit of that sort of bubbling effect. In other words, it's a decorative effect. Slight filigree. This time's harmonic minor. So it's to support this attacking a Star Destroyer theme. That one. And you know, occasionally he has sort of scalic types. So I'm not really dealing with that at the moment. So that was just that very small example at that moment. Then we've also got, what was the one that uses quite a lot? Yeah, 11M1 through the window. Let's go with that. Which we've seen quite recently, actually, on my channel, if you've been following it on a weekly basis. And I mean, you know, even that could be described as a sort of bubbling effect, you know, this sort of ostinato. And it's, guess what? It's essentially a sort of octatonic idea, except it's sort of A minor as well. So there's, you know, it fulfills lots of different criteria at that point as well. So a sort of unison bubbling effect. But actually we have much earlier on this idea. So this one, again, it's an Imperial March, but this time it's an aleatoric bubble. So we have this. That sort of idea going on. But during that, we've got this completely diatonic B minor. Sort of Locrian mode, really. So it's all sort of white notes of the keyboard. So Locrian B against B minor. So you get that sort of really weird, sort of horrible sort of chromaticism of F sharp against the F natural. Where is it? There. And then it changes, though, because he sort of wants to avoid the minor ninth often. So he's changing that to a B flat when that's lower in pitch. But I don't think anybody else is playing. Oh no, he is playing a B as well in the cello. So you'll see there's a B and a B flat, but that's okay because that's a major seventh. So that sort of fits okay. But you will have that sort of real sort of gnarly semitone between the B flat and the B natural as well. So it's another sort of example of that sort of bubbling idea. So I think I said 51 was a sort of unison bubble, and in fact this bit is as well. So we have a sort of, you know, I've said compare with the Wampa Cave Luke's Escape, where we had the same sort of mixed modality. So in this one, octatonic and Locrian Hungarian minor. So violin 1 plays octatonic T1, missing a note, and violin 2 plays A harmonic minor. So again, harmonic minor, melodic minor, and octatonic seems to be his go-to sort of bubble texture scale types. So yeah, that seems to work. I think that was the only one from that particular one. We've got a little bit in the Carbon Freeze, which is just Night on Bald Mountain. So that's probably about enough to be going on with. I did mention something in Phantom Menace, but I don't want to sort of go completely like, oh no, I can't find it. So I will try and find what it is. I think it is actually in this one before we get to the bubble world. So it's when they're sort of swimming. And I think that's where we get that sort of choral texture. Yeah, so another bubble here. So it's the bit Yeah, so it's sort of, Fly to the Bumblebee, Rimsky-Korsakov territory here, isn't it? So in this one, sort of, it seems strange going back to the Phantom Menace after all this time. But we're basically in B flat minor. Classic sort of, chord progression, an outwards chord progression. So the bottom note goes down by a semitone, the top note goes up by a semitone, and the middle note stays the same. It's one of those sort of neo-Riemannian transformations that often occur in Williams. But it's effective. It's sort of very typical film. So guess what? We've got 0134 octatonic patterns in there. I'll do that again. So you can see always on octatonic patterns, they've got this sort of whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone type idea. Often it starts with here a semitone. When he wants to be more melodic, he'll put a tone in the first two notes. So that pretty much stays the same. But also he's using little 0134 separately from different scale types as well. So it's not always octatonic, T0, in other words, original. It can be mixed. And then he's changing it to a harmonic minor as it sort of goes up. So there, so harmonic minor. So it's always in support of the general harmony that is happening as well. So that was the bit that I wanted to show you, that sort of bubbling effect. And then we've got a nice little bit of flute and wind filigree just going down as well. Another good bit. There we go. So complete chromatic scale as well, which is actually quite rare, oddly, in Williams. So the last bit is just this sort of little bit of flute stuff as well. We also get that sort of bubbling texture often in Celeste as well, so let's not forget that. But I just wanted to sort of do that for strings because I think it's a good way of adding energy to music without sort of getting in the way of anything as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that slightly short session, and next time we'll look at something else. Take care.